Welcome to MalcolmPresents.com with Courtney on Health. And as usual, to lead it off, Maxine Rubin Margot, or Margot Rubin.
Margot Rubin.
Margot
Right.
Rubin, okay.
That's me.
I don't want to insult any of the...
Don't worry about it. I go by Hey You, so it's okay. Uh, so hello, Courtney, and hello, Malcolm. And yes, welcome to Courtney on Health, a Zoomcast series about how to survive the COVID-19 pandemic, which we're getting out of, but still inside of, with tips on nutrition and exercise given by Courtney Gravenese, registered dietitian with a Master of Science degree in nutrition and applied physiology. Courtney is an experienced nutritional and health consultant in the New York metro area and beyond, obviously, and will help guide you on a path to wellness and health. So here we go. This is one I kind of picked out of, I don't know why, but it kind of relates in a strange way. There was an old show called I Love Lucy, and I think a lot of people, even the youngins, know it. And there was one particular episode where she was trying to sell this particular product. So I'm gonna kind of do what she said, what the script said, and what she did on the show. Hello, friends. I'm your Vitamita Vegemin girl. Are you tired, run down, listless? Do you poop out at parties? Are you unpopular? The answer to all your problems is in this little bottle. Vitamita Vegemin. Yes, Vitamita Vegemin contains vitamins, meat, vegetables, and minerals. Yes, with Vitamita Vegemin, you can spoon your way to health. All you do is take a great big tablespoon after every meal. It's so tasty too. Tastes like candy. So why don't you join all the thousands of happy, peppy people and get a great big bottle of Vitamita Vegemin tomorrow? That's Vitamita Vegemin. So I don't think that Vitamita Vegemin is your panacea to a long and happy life. If you want to live longer and be content, the people who live in the blue zones are the ones to take your cues from.
Well, Max, I hate to interrupt you, but the gag of that thing was the bottle was spiked.
Right.
And the more she drank,
she got drunk.
She got slurry.
Right. So I wasn't going to do the entire thing per the acting. I'm just repeating it. But yes, that is true. And okay. Some of these blue zones, they do drink some wine, and Courtney will tell us which ones they are. So these blue zones, centenarians in the blue zones are the longest living people in the world. They aren't trying to eat healthy or live to 100. They aren't counting calories or reading food labels. They simply eat what is local, in season, and readily available. So Courtney today will discuss those foods and the lifestyles that comprise the blue zone diets and delve into the mindset needed to live a long and prosperous life. So take it away, Courtney. What are these blue zones? What's the definition?
Oh gosh, I have to tell you, I had so much fun. I've known about the blue zones. I had so much fun researching this. It's fascinating to me. So for those of you not familiar with it, so the history of blue zones, it started back in 2000 when a researcher decided to investigate or explore why was it that the men in particular, Sardinia, Italy, were living, and not just living well, into their hundreds. So what was it about it? So it started there, and from there, it expanded into identifying those areas around the world that also had similar results. So either men or women living well into their hundreds. So what was it unique about these particular countries? So, flash forward about, 14 years when all the research was said and done, there are 5 blue zones. And I learned from my colleague here, Maxine, I knew about the circles. They basically looked at maps after Sardinia and drew circles around the areas that had the highest centenarians living within them. I did not realize that the blue zones were circled in blue. So hence the names blue zones. So it's very unique, these population of people. I want to make sure at the end of our time today, we talk about how to apply what we've learned from those cultures and how best to layer it in over America, because it's almost impossible to replicate exactly what these countries, are doing. So let's start from the top. So those zones, starting with Sardinia, Italy, it's Okinawa, Japan, it's Ikaria, Greece, it's Nicoya, the Nicoya Peninsula in Costa Rica, and it's Loma Linda, California. So it's interesting, like the one in California, it's like, well, why they're in California and nowhere else? If you're not familiar with that particular section of Loma Linda, California, it happens to have one of the largest population of Seventh-day Adventists. So dipping back into my old research days, Seventh-day Adventists typically follow a mostly vegetarian diet. They don't drink, they don't smoke. So as such, they have become, for researchers, an incredible baseline study group because of the fact that it's a clean group. Like they're not participating in those things that we know or have known that are associated with developing disease and risk. So it's interesting about, in particular, that section of California. So these 5 areas, not only are they living longer, they're living longer really well. So what is it about them? It's much more than diet, and we'll definitely delve into some of the dietary practices that they follow, but it really is a culture of lifestyle, of their habits, of the environment that really participates or really influences just how well they move into their their hundreds. So why matter? Why does it matter if you live into 100? What we know, in addition to this population of people living into their hundreds, is that almost non-existent rates of dementia in these 5 zones, lower rates of cancer, lower rates of depression, lower rates, half the rate of heart disease, particularly in the United States, but also worldwide. So again, not just living long, they're living disease-free. And I thought that the statistic about no rates of dementia was particularly interesting. I had not heard that particular piece of data before. So it's a wide net that covers all of these different areas. So let's take a look at just the diet right now. So what we were talking a little bit before we hopped on the call about wine intake and alcohol intake. Well, I just mentioned that the Seventh-day Adventists don't drink at all. So you might say, well, then that's it. Just eliminate alcohol, entirely from your diet, and then it puts you at a better, health, situation. Not necessarily so. The remaining 4 countries absolutely drink in moderation. It's typically wine. It's typically very strong wine, very high in flavonoid content and antioxidant content, but usually no more than 1 to 2 drinks a day. So again, if you're sort of looking at this and say, what's my take-home message from here? We do hear about moderation. If you don't drink, certainly don't start to drink now. But we do know that small amount of in particular wine seem to be part of the mix of their overall diet. Vegetarianism, I don't want to say vegetarian, I want to say plant-based. Because if you really drill down to country by country, now keep in mind, they're not all eating the exact same way in every country. Some are on the coast, some are not. What's available? Is there seafood available? What are crops like? So there is a great common denominator there. That common denominator being there's a tremendous amount of vegetable intake, much more so than what we're consuming in the United States. Beans, legumes, there is dairy in there. Now, some of it's coming from goat, some of it is coming from, cow's milk dairy, but depending on which country you're looking at, really sort of drives whether it's a big component of their diet or maybe a smaller component of it. So feta cheese, pecorino cheese, these are all very sort of cultural specificities related to the different country where they're in. So fascinating intake about because I know dairy is one of those hotbed foods. People it's absolutely horrible for us. Well, maybe But we don't see that, certainly not in these 5 blue zones.
Well, I have a question on because I was looking through different things too. It is fascinating, and it basically said that 95% of the diet is high fiber. You mentioned beans and legumes. Uh, that's a huge part of your. I mean, that's a large part, which means the alcohol, the dairy, whatever it is, it's a much smaller part. But and they said that Americans are really devoid of high fiber in their diets, and perhaps this is a way to get people to go, hey, you want to be a a blue zone person, start really hitting the fiber.
Yeah, absolutely. And even within, I mean, there's, the fiber can come from, and we've discussed this before altogether, right? Your fiber is only going to come from plant-based foods. So even if one country, so for example, Greece might have Ikaria might have a greater concentration of grains over, let's say, Okinawa, but Okinawa might have greater intake of sweet potato over rice. So the different types of high fiber foods within those regions is varied, but you're right, very high fiber, very high in antioxidants, very high in these phytochemicals. Those flavonoids that we mentioned are really the zambonis of your arteries. So they get in there and they help push out the gunk that's sitting in the side of your arteries. So the higher that level, the greater your body's ability to clear whatever it is that might be starting to brew in terms of disease formation. So yeah, you're right, Maxine. We are woefully low in fiber intake. The average American fiber intake is only about somewhere between 12 to 14 grams a day, and we should be closer to 25 to 35 grams a day. So we got a long way to go.
I hate to be specific, but fiber helps your regularity. And one of the things that people really don't discuss or talk about is the regularity is a thing that cleans your system, and that it's very important. Again, even though no one really discusses it, but that's the cleansing system for your to get rid of all the toxics in your body.
Absolutely, Malcolm. And once again, as a dietitian, I can't seem to get away from talking about poop. So yes, you're right. Insoluble fiber is the fiber that helps with bulking and helps with elimination. So that's key. The soluble fiber, which is where those lentils, those beans are really so key. And again, there seems to be a decent amount of those in any of the 5 zones that we're talking about today. So that soluble fiber, I mentioned that Zamboni before, helps gel some of the compounds inside your system, captures it in that gel, and helps eliminate it from the body. So it's a combination of both of the 2 fibers, insoluble fiber and soluble fiber together, that really do this 1-2 punch in terms of overall health. So again, although varying types of intake with regard to plant-based, it's mostly plant-based, not talking about vegan. So in terms of applying that to the American way, I think that makes it a lot more reasonable for us to maybe try. Because it doesn't mean never eating anything again, any meat products again. So again, depending on the zone we were looking at, it might mean maybe fish, a small serving of fish every day. It might mean a small serving of, again, beef is not popular in any of these countries, probably it's just where they're situated. But whatever animal product they're eating, it tends to be, and this is important to reinforce, a very small serving size. So 3 to 4 ounces, which is around the size of a deck of cards. The data that I looked at, remember, these are averages. So remember that there may be lower and there may be above this, but generally anything meat, whether it be chicken, lamb, beef, or fish, was generally about 4 servings a month, which I realize for a lot of people is far less than what they're consuming today. But at least it's a reference mark to realize, okay, that's how much they're consuming, and this is what we see in terms of their overall health.
Do you realize after this show, McDonald's is going to go down by 50%?
I don't know about that, but
Well, they're trying out. I know Burger King has the Impossible Burger, which is plant-based, but there's been some skepticism about the ingredients of those as well. But it's not meat, and people seem to be buying it, so they're keeping it on. And I don't know if McDonald's is following. I don't know that.
Well, I think I read where it was Nathan's Hot Dogs and they come out with a vegetarian hot dog.
They did.
They did
You can actually buy it online.
a vegetarian hot dog.
Right. It's
And
crazy.
goodness,
But
we've
yeah.
spoken so much about like the processed side of vegan and plant-based foods, which that's not what these blue, I can assure you that folks in the blue zones are not, they're eating tofu for sure, but they're not eating a, tofu hot dog. They're eating in its least processed form. So again, take that for what it's worth. But it's important to realize the stuff that they're eating is very local, probably minimally processed. It is mostly plant-based, but that does not mean they never eat fish or meat at all. They certainly include some type of dairy, some of them, some of the zones. And one thing to keep in mind, and we actually have fairly decent data, and it's not recent data, it's been around for quite some time, that talks about the benefits of calorie restriction as it helps reduce sort of the typical aging process symptoms that we see. So better aging. That doesn't mean starve yourself. I'm not talking about, skipping meals, all the time, but generally 30% reduction in your calorie intake leads to not only longer life, but a better life when you get there. So take that for what it's worth. When you look at these blue zones, they are not eating huge amounts of food the way we typically eat in America. Remember, maybe not everybody, but when you look at sort of epidemiology of the way Americans eat, we're overfed and undernourished, as opposed to the blue zone countries that are maybe they're not underfed, but they're right in there and they're overnourished. I mean, they're getting the nutrients in there. So look at that from that different lens. You have a question?
Yeah, there's another aspect, obviously, which I'll bring up, so you can go with it. A lot of these areas, the people they continue working, and they just, they'll work, whether it's in the field or working on farms or, the Seventh-day Adventists. I'm not sure how that applies, but they also have a purpose in life. There's a Japanese phrase, ikigai, I guess. And it's having purpose and having a life well lived. And they have a social identity, work and family, and self-realization. And that's very key. As we spoke about the other week about, thinking younger, makes your, right. So can you, comment on that?
Oh, absolutely. So again, when I comb through those, and obviously when I have my dietitian's hat on and my exercise physiologist hat, I'm thinking specifically, okay, so yeah, we know it's diet. One of the other tenets is absolutely activity. So they're not going to do a kickboxing class at a local gym, and they're not doing CrossFit. They're walking and they're gardening. So it's not a big bar to meet in terms of the type of activity level. So activity is definitely part of that. The social network, the importance of family. Elderly are celebrated in these zones. They're part of a very strong community. And just like you said, Maxine, they have a very strong sense of purpose. They're very driven and they have a very positive outlook. So whether that's through helping through the community, helping family members, it's key to feel that you're needed in terms of, I want to stick around. They don't know exactly what it is about it, but there's something, when they did their research, there was definitely something to the element of feeling needed, positive outlook, and a sense of purpose. Faith was a big part of it. And it seemed to be, it doesn't matter which denomination it was, that was part of the mix. Like when they interviewed the residents of these zones, these countries, these communities, they almost across the boards all had some kind of connection to whatever faith they believed in. So, and again, the elderly were celebrated. So if you feel like you're wanted, there appears to be something to that in terms of your longevity and your desire to want to continue that purpose.
Right. I'm going through something like this with my brother who lives in New York, who's I don't know if it's dementia or Alzheimer's, but he's in a nursing home. And his problem when I talk to him is the loneliness, is not the family. He's not living with his family. He's living with strangers. And sometimes he doesn't, it switches because his mind is not there. He doesn't remember. But I mean, the problem is, what do you do about it? It's we no longer, when in our society, especially when you live in big cities, you have an apartment that sort of, has so many rooms that you're not on top of each other. So, the elderly, I don't know if you have any older parents that could live with you, but they don't. They have to be shut aside, like my brother. His wife can't take him. His daughter can't. There's no room. So where do you put them? I'm not asking you for an answer.
It's hard. I mean, I took care of my mom for almost 11 years, but I was lucky because I have room in my house, and only when she became, after like a minor stroke, and it became so difficult to give her the proper care that I have to, bring her to a nursing facility, which out of all of them was pretty good, but I call her, she lived to 101, and her attitude was unbelievable. Her will, and was, I've never seen anything like it. Her will to just keep, and she could have kept going because COVID, I call her COVID collateral, but that's a whole other thing. But getting back to the importance of, being with family, being even with those who practice the same religion, and having that sense of purpose is key. I mean, it's key. I mean,
and it's not just, a whim or an opinion. I mean, it may be driven slightly by opinion, but this is some fairly solid, data. I mean, the proof's in the pudding. I mean, to quote, sort of an overused phrase, but so as it applies to Americans, you bring up a really valid point in both of you, in that how do we apply that in this country? You're right, Malcolm, where families aren't, first of all, some people are choosing not to have children, right? So people are, birth rates are going down, people travel around, they're not with their family anymore. So the way I sort of envision this is put each of these tenets in a bucket, right? And because remember, we talked about goal setting back in January, right around, New Year's time. Put all these tenets in a bucket, and each of us try to evaluate, okay, where can I make the most progress here, right? What makes the most sense for me? So you might not be living anywhere near family members, but maybe, so your social circle then, remember, it could be friends, it could be it's really about relationship building. So maybe if you don't have any siblings, or you don't have children, or maybe it's, for you, it's going to be super important to take a look at the community of friends you have around you and build that so these friends become family-like. So maybe that's an option for somebody who doesn't have that core. They don't have any faith. They're atheist or agnostic. So build it out of the friend base that you have. So maybe that's a possibility for you. What's your activity level like? Well, chances are there's a lot of one thing that came out is that there's napping. They tend to nap in the afternoon, not very long, but they nap, and they eat a lighter meal at night. But for Americans, most Americans aren't napping in the middle of the day, nor does that seem practical if you're working all day long. So, okay, well, maybe that's not going to apply for you, but maybe you can walk a little bit more. You can exercise. We've got all the data we need to suggest, and I love gyms, okay? I think they're fantastic, but you do not, I think we're doing Americans a disservice by saying to them, gym and only gym, when meanwhile we have so much data to say, get some sneakers, get a friend, get outside. It's one of the best things that we can do in terms of activity. So put exercise in a bucket and kind of pick from there.
Outdoors. It's good to be outdoors. We just had a guest on the Many Shades of Green, Evan Harper, who's an outdoor therapist, and it's actually now one of the therapies that they're doing. They're getting patients to get out into put down their devices and go into the, park or woods or whatever, and get more connected. And it seems to be something that's working.
Yeah, but
And
even like if you just do mundane things and don't do exercise, what people don't do is they'll see an elevator. They'll take the elevator right away to go 1 or 2 flights. You can walk up the 1 or 2 flights. If they'll see an escalator, they'll take the escalator versus walking up, and that's built-in exercise.
Right, right. So that's where these small goal setting steps are so key. Because if I worked with a client and laid out these tenets and said, okay, you got to go to mostly plant-based, you got to start to, 16,000 steps every day. By the way, you got to start praying. You got to spend more time with mom and dad. I mean, they go,
Okay.
but so you got to take it by step by step. That's why my bucket theory. I'm like, okay, so put these in some buckets and take out of the bucket those things that you think you can work on, appropriately goal set, and then take it from there. Volunteering. One thing that came up in the research about these zones is that part of that community base, they strongly believe in giving back to some, so maybe your volunteering is caring for that elderly person or that individual in the family, but it also might mean caring for the local garden that's in the community that grows most of your food. So I think in almost every community, there's a way to find, if time permits, again, it's not for everybody, to try to find a way to give back. That ability to give back feels good. And if you feel good, you're in a better headspace, and you can see how this all layers into it's just a better outlook overall.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's really important that giving back, is part of your existence. I mean, you can't just, everyone yells at the me, like, the youngers are me. And, but I see a lot of them are trying to give back, which is good. And then I do something really quickly. I saw an article that in Boomer World, those unfortunate, those who might have lost a spouse, and this is women, are making pacts with their friends to be like the Golden Girls. The Golden Girls they lived together, right? They were a unit. That show really brought together that friendship is so very important. And when I saw that, I went, huh, but then I thought about the show, and I'm going, that's so true. They have the 5 of them, or 4 of them, they were each other's, you can rely on them for help, and show to be, if you need to cry on their shoulder. So it might be something that's happening, a Golden Girls movement. Who knows?
My mom loved that show, and she used to laugh. And by the way, speaking of laughter, that's another thing. I mean, not across the board, but there's something to be said. And listen, chances are, if you're spending time with people that you enjoy their company, it makes you feel good. It's making you laugh. There's a lot to be said about laughter in terms of that endorphin rush, which we know is not just touchy-feely. There's some.
But you hit a point about earlier with families, and I know with my family, when they were first generation, my parents, but the brothers and the sisters and all the aunts and uncles probably lived within a 2-mile radius of each other.
Yeah.
Now the second and third cousins live in other states. But what I recently found out, again, is Zooming, which we're doing now, or Facebook. I keep in contact with second, third cousins who I've never really met.
Yeah.
But I know what they're doing because I get Facebook things from them from Philadelphia, or I live in Los Angeles, but from Cincinnati, or one's married, lives in Japan with her husband. I get Facebooks. We do Zooming. I'm Zooming with you guys.
Yeah, well, Facebook is definitely hit an older demo, which is why the kiddies are staying far away from it. I think it's actually morphed into more for an elder group, not elders, but a more advanced adult group than when it started out with the really young ones in high school.
Yeah, but the kids are doing different things. My son is doing Instagram. He sends pictures.
Right, really, any of the social media, you can stay connected that way. Again,
it's contact.
If you're not in the same state, the same country, certainly I think that that should be the way to go to feel connected. But the preference, as you mentioned, Maxine, is, there's nothing quite like that, one-on-one, interpersonal. But you got to work with what you have, and obviously you can't, be in person for somebody who's living in a different continent. So, but there's something to be said for that. And just, with regards to, as I said, I found the dietary aspects very fascinating. And I think for me, I thought a great take home, as an educator, working with people, because you hear so many things about what you should eat, what you should not eat. I think it opened up a lot of opportunity for, there's probably something in each of these meal plans around these zones for all of us, right? I mean, I think it's a taller hill to climb if you're somebody who's eating meat every single day at 2 out of 3 meals, then the goal setting needs to be very, very tiny. But I think for a lot of us, it's okay, great. You know what? I do like dairy foods. I like different. Then okay, we see that you can have that. Nuts, beans, legumes. These are things that you can pull in there, and it doesn't mean never having, something that meat-based products at all. But it does mean taking a look at a lot of the processing, no matter what form it is, and the amount of, one thing that didn't come up in a lot of these is not a lot of birthday cakes, not a lot of cupcakes, not a lot of brownies and cookies and stuff like that. I'm not taking that away from anybody, but again, it's something to be said about the sweet that they were getting was generally from fruit, mostly, and fresh fruit, dried fruit, and not necessarily from the level of sweet foods that are pervasive in the American diet.
Right. Maybe we should take away the cakes and cookies and the candies.
Boo! Are you kidding? I don't know about Sardinia. I mean, they drink lots of red wine. But
substitute the red wine.
I don't know if any of them ever go into the cities like Florence and have gelato. Sorry. I mean the pastries in some of these places are, in Italy is like crazy. So
right. Well, the key word would be moderation. But anyway, guys, our time is up. But I'd like to get in another show, we'll talk about stress, how that, in a modern day society, how stress shortens life, and how things that you can do to relax, to not, what is it, cortisol, that when you're stressed out?
One of them, cortisol, stress hormone.
Yeah. We want to stay away from stress, but we've been in pandemic times. We still are in pandemic times, and stress is still very much part of what's happening in that realm, and hopefully we'll get out of it, and people need to de-stress. So I think Courtney's going to have to talk about meditation at some point, and maybe give some meditative exercises.
Yeah, and
one of the shows, that would be great.
And sleep, proper sleep, it all layers into that stress. So.
Right. But anyway, guys.
All right.
Well, where can we reach you, Courtney? Where can our audience reach you?
You can find me on my Facebook page, my Courtney on Health Facebook page. You can reach me on Instagram, which is probably where I reach most folks. So that's CLG Wellness. And you can also just reach out and contact me through the website, which is CourtneyGravenese.com. So
yeah, Courtney has some great stuff on there, and there'll be even more stuff. So,
and you also can see, you can see all past shows on MalcolmPresents.com. Just scroll down to Courtney on Health, and we have all the back show, this show, as well as all the back shows.
Right, and I also posted on the ManyShadesOfGreen.com. So there's a number of places to find Courtney. She can't hide from us. So
and YouTube.
Yes, YouTube. So I will get the outro going now. Thanks for joining us for Courtney on Health. To get more info, I'll repeat all of this. Courtney on her Facebook page, Courtney on Health, on Instagram at CLG Wellness. Visit her website, CourtneyGravenese.com. For more shows, you can go to, as Malcolm says, MalcolmPresents.com and theManyShadesOfGreen.com. So Courtney on Health, smart sound nutrition, strong, safe fitness, and we'll catch you next time.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.